A company sends an email on a Tuesday morning in March. Subject line, important organizational update. You have been there 2 years. You covered for a colleague during a family emergency. You stayed late for a quarterly review nobody forced on you. At noon, your access is revoked. The Slack message you drafted for 3 days never gets read because your account is already suspended. HR will follow up with paperwork within 72 hours. That is the whole relationship closed. And this is not the rare story anymore. This is now the average story. What makes it worth dissecting is not the human tragedy of it. What makes it interesting is the part that comes after, the part that happens inside the head of the person who just got deleted. Because this generation does not go home crying, come back compliant. They run the numbers. They update their model of how the world actually works. Then they change their behavior permanently in ways that do not reverse when the economy recovers. So here's the question I want to answer cold. What happens to a labor market when 40 million workers update that model at the same time? We are going to take apart how the corporate loyalty contract actually worked, why it broke, and why the breakage is now turning structurally strange in ways almost nobody is pricing in. I am not going to comfort you. I am going to show you the mechanism. The mechanism is more interesting than the outrage and far more useful to anyone building a plan. Think of a company as a vending machine. The original deal was mechanical. You insert coins and the machine dispenses product. Your coins are your hours, your deference, your silence when you disagree, your decision to not leave when a better offer lands in your inbox. Both sides understood the interface. The buttons made sense. The output was predictable, and that predictability was the entire point. The machine's product used to be stability, gradual wage growth, a pension that meant you would not depend on your children at 70, healthcare that would not bankrupt you, and the reasonable understanding that if you stayed loyal, the machine would stay operational long enough for you to retire out of it. That was the old contract, and for decades it roughly held. Over about 40 years, someone quietly swapped the products inside the machine. No announcement, no press release. The exterior stayed identical. It kept accepting coins, kept making the sound of accepting them. But the output side was gutted. Pensions vanished. Job security became a story people told. Health insurance got shifted onto you. The slot still works. Nothing meaningful comes out. Most people get the cause wrong. The popular narrative says companies just turned greedy, that CEOs stopped caring somewhere in the 1980s, that corporations went evil. There is a version of that not entirely false, but framed as a morality play, kind bosses versus ruthless bosses, you miss what actually happened. What happened was not a personality change, it was a system-level incentive shift. In 1970, the economist Milton Friedman published an essay arguing a corporation's only legitimate social responsibility is to increase profits for shareholders, not employees, not community. Worker welfare, long-term stability, investment in human capital, all reclassified as cost, not duty. This was not one man hypnotizing a country. It was a logic the incentive structure rewarded so consistently it became the water everyone swam in. Shareholder primacy became the default operating assumption. When a CEO is graded quarterly on earnings per share and stock price, ask what gets cut first when margins compress. Not the dividend, not the buyback program, not the executive compensation package, the payroll. Because payroll is the biggest line item, and cutting it shows up immediately in the exact numbers that decide whether the CEO keeps the chair. Here is the thing about incentives. They require no malice. They require no villain twirling a mustache. They only require a system where the reward for cutting people exceeds the punishment for cutting them. For decades, that has been the precise structure. The CEO who cuts is not cruel. The CEO is responding to gradients, the same way water finds the low ground. The clearest artifact of the old deal was the pension. A defined benefit plan, a guaranteed payout in retirement, the thing that made staying 30 years rational. Today, fewer than 4% of companies offer anything resembling it. Sit with that. The explicit promise that justified long-term employment has been eliminated at scale, while the expectation of loyalty was quietly left fully intact. It got replaced with a 401k, where the outcome depends on the market, your own contribution discipline, and whether you pick the right index funds at 23. When you barely understood compounding, the risk moved from the company's balance sheet onto yours silently. The machine changed the products, kept the same coin slot, and kept expecting the exact same coins from you. Now Gen Z enters specifically. They are not the first generation to face this shift, but they are the first to enter the workforce after it fully matured. Boomers got the old machine before it changed. Millennials got a hybrid, some old promises, some new reality, with the floor dropping in 2001 and cratering in 2008. The timing decides everything about what you believe. Union membership, the only structural counterweight to corporate power, fell from a third of private sector workers in the 1950s to below 10% today. So by roughly 2017, when Gen Z started arriving, the machine was already fully stripped. No pension, eroding security, premiums climbing every year, the 401k as the sole retirement vehicle, and a student debt load the prior generation never carried at that scale. Then something strange happened, almost cruel in its timing. The pandemic created an anomaly. From 2020 to 2022, companies went on a hiring spree. Some tech firms nearly doubled headcount. Signing bonuses, inflated salaries, remote flexibility, unlimited PTO that sounded generous. Suddenly, the machine looked like it was dispensing freely. Young workers got offers 20, 30, 40% above expectation and wondered if the deal was real again. Then 2022 arrived. Interest rates went up. Growth slowed. The math changed. Tech layoffs surged in the correction. Roughly 93,000 U.S. tech workers cut that year. That figure more than doubled in 2023, around 200,000. By 2025, 271 companies cut more than 124,000. The same firm that mailed you the branded hoodie mailed you the Tuesday email. What changed between the hoodie and the email? The math. That is the entire answer. When the math said hire, they hired. When the math said cut, they cut. The relationship was never the variable being adjusted. You were never the variable they optimized for. You were always just a number sitting inside a model, and the model had simply resolved itself. Gen Z processed this not as betrayal, because you can only be betrayed by someone who genuinely promised you something. They processed it as information. The machine told them precisely what it was, and they believed it. That distinction matters enormously. A betrayed person seeks repair. An informed person updates their behavior and never looks back because there is nothing emotional left to resolve. Gen Z's average tenure in the first 5 years of a career is just 1.1 years. Millennials sat at 1.8, Gen the 10th at 2.8, Boomers at 2.9. That number is not a work ethic failure or a character flaw. It is a rational response to a system that stopped offering what stability used to mean. You do not stay loyal to a machine that gives nothing back. That is arithmetic. Here is where commentary misses the central insight. People treat layoffs as purely economic events. The economy slowed, the company overhired, revenue missed projections, technically accurate, but a layoff is not only an economic event for the person experiencing it, and critically for everyone watching, it is an information event. It answers a question that was never directly asked out loud. It tells you who you actually are inside this system. And the answer almost every time is that you are a variable cost, not a member of the family, a line item on a cost structure spreadsheet. When that line became inconvenient, it was deleted. Strip away the difficult decision language and the message is brutally clean. When removing you became financially optimal, we removed you. That is not evil. That is the machine executing exactly what the incentive structure trained it to do. But here is the second order effect nobody names directly. Once you understand the machine will remove you the moment it becomes optimal, you recalibrate. You stop giving discretionary effort, not out of spite, out of arithmetic. If the contract is transactional on their side, you make it transactional on yours. And quietly, in the parallel track of your life, you begin building something that cannot send you a Tuesday morning email. This is the mechanism that makes layoffs so devastatingly effective at eroding trust among the youngest workers. The people cut are not the only ones who change. Everyone who survived watches and runs the identical calculation about themselves. If they did it to those people, they will do it to me. The rational response is to reduce investment in the company's future and aggressively increase investment in your own optionality. So the firm cuts 10%, expecting the remaining 90% to hold morale and output. Instead, a chunk of that 90% is already updating LinkedIn and having conversations they were not having last month. The short-term financial win carries a long-term cultural cost that appears nowhere in the quarterly report. And by 2025, the reason shifted again. The wave was less about fixing past overhiring and more about strategic restructuring, driven by economic pressure and the rapid adoption of AI. AI was cited as the reason for nearly 55,000 layoffs in that single year. This changes the nature of the signal entirely. The 2022 and 2023 cuts could be read as a correction. They overhired, they adjusted, painful but legible inside the old logic. The newer wave is structurally different. Salesforce eliminated more than 4,000 customer support roles in June 2025. Its CEO saying AI already did 30 to 50% of the company's work. That is a categorically different message than we overhired in 2021. The new message is we found a cheaper substitute for your labor and implemented it. The machine learned to get the output without needing your coins at all, and the data underneath is harsher than the headlines. Global job postings for roles requiring 0 to 2 years of experience fell an average of 29 percentage points since January 2024. Junior tech roles down 35%. Logistics down 25%. Finance down 24%. You are 22 with a degree. You were told the credential was the key, that if you got educated and showed up, the machine would hold a slot. Now you learn the machine is being retrofitted specifically for the slots that were supposed to be yours. The ladder lost its bottom rungs, despite higher education rates than any prior generation. Gen Z faces credential inflation, where entry-level postings now demand years of experience that entry-level was supposed to provide. Nearly half, 48%, do not feel financially secure in 2025, against just 30% in 2024. That jump 30 to 48 in 1 year is not noise. It is a system transmitting information in real time. Let me make this concrete because abstraction only lands as math. Picture a guy, call him Marcus, 24, data analyst at a mid-sized tech firm, 2 years in, $72,000 a year, hired in the 2022 boom. Good at his job, not exceptional, good. Showed up, delivered, did not complain, went to the optional Friday check-ins because he wanted to be seen as someone who cared. He skipped 2 outside interviews because he told himself he was building something here. He contributed 6% to his 401k because onboarding said maximize the match. He believed he was playing the game correctly. Then in March 2024, his team of 12 gets trimmed to 8. Marcus survives, but 2 of the cut were colleagues he talked to every single day. Marcus does not panic. He watches, and he notices something specific. The 4-year veteran who got cut earned about $18,000 more than him. More seniority, more institutional knowledge, more relationships, more documented impact, and she was first out the door. So Marcus asked the obvious question, why cut the higher paid experienced employee before the cheaper newer one? The answer is not complicated, because she was more expensive. The machine optimized for cost, not value. Her loyalty, her 4 years, her knowledge, her relationships had translated into raises that made her, from the machine's view, the more expensive line item. So the machine deleted the more expensive line first. That single observation rewrites Marcus's mental model permanently, not the existence of layoffs, the pattern of who gets cut. He sees what people rarely say aloud. Seniority is not protection. Loyalty does not accumulate as an asset on the company's ledger. The machine does not reward you for staying. It can punish you for staying, because staying means raises, and raises make you more expensive than the new hire at today's compressed market rate. So Marcus stops optimizing for seniority and starts optimizing for optionality. He sets a rule, no more than 18 months anywhere unless something structural changes, equity, real growth, something that pays him for the risk of concentration. He picks up 1 freelance client on the side, consulting on data pipelines for small startups, roughly $600 a month. Nothing dramatic. A second node on his income map. 18 months later, Marcus is at a different company. New salary, $88,000, $16,000 more than before. He got there by moving, not by waiting. His freelance income now sits around $1,100 a month. He is 25, total income just under $100,000. No viral brand, no millions. A diversified income structure built because he watched the machine cut his colleague and learned single source income is a vulnerability he cannot afford. Do the math on what loyalty would have cost him. Stay at company 1, take a standard 3 to 4% annual raise, and he is at roughly $78,000 now. That is a $22,000 annual gap between the loyal path and the optionality path. Over 5 years compounded at modest returns, that gap is roughly $120,000 to $150,000 in cumulative wealth. And that is before the freelance income which he keeps regardless of which employer he works for. That node is not tied to any company. The Tuesday email cannot touch it. So you think loyalty is the problem. It is not. The problem is what loyalty actually returns in this specific system, which is less than the alternative while carrying more concentration risk. Picture the layoff meeting itself. A calendar invite lands at 9:47 for a 10 o'clock flagged high priority, your manager plus an HR person you have never seen. 11 minutes to sit with what is coming. HR's camera stays off. Your role has been eliminated. They are very sorry. There is severance. The whole interaction takes 11 minutes to close a relationship you spent 2 years building. If that does not update your model, nothing will. And here is where the standard narrative quits. Someone gets cut, feels bad, job hops, starts a side hustle, eventually lands somewhere new. But what is actually happening is structurally deeper. The behavioral shift is not a market cycle. It is a permanent recalibration of what this generation will put into the machine, producing second-order effects at scale. You might say this is just a pay strategy, not a trust issue. Fair. For a while, about 83% of Gen Z self-identified as job hoppers in a 2023 report. Nearly a third changed jobs that year, 35% explicitly chasing higher wages. The financial logic was real and the premium was real. But watch what happened to that premium next. Workers who stayed put saw wage increases of 4.6%, while switchers got a measly extra 0.2%. The salary premium for hopping compressed to essentially zero. And yet the behavior continues. Tenure stays at 1.1 years. Freelancing accelerates rather than slows. A 2024 Forbes report put 53% of Gen Z in freelance or self-employed work against 44% of millennials and 30% of Gen the 10th. 70% are freelancing or planned. So if the financial incentive evaporated and the behavior accelerated anyway, what actually drives it? The money was never the cause. The money was the permission structure. The real driver is more durable. Gen Z changed what it optimizes for. Not salary at one employer. They optimize for what I call economic surface area. Think of your income sources as a map. One job is a single point. One employer, one payroll, one point of failure. If it disappears, the map goes blank. Economic surface area is how wide that map is, how many points, how spread, so no single event wipes it. 67% of Gen Z call having multiple income streams essential to financial security. 56% think traditional employment will become obsolete. And the desire to work for a well-known corporation ranks among their lowest career ambitions, just 14%. That is not apathy. It is a value system built on observed evidence. You watched the machine eat your colleagues, watched entry doors shrink, watched AI cited for tens of thousands of cuts in 1 year, then got asked if a Fortune 500 is the dream. This is portfolio theory applied to income. You would never put 100% of your portfolio in one stock. Diversification reduces risk without necessarily reducing return. Gen Z is not doing this from a finance textbook. They are doing it because they saw what happens to people who held only 1 point on the map. Diversification stopped being optional. It became basic risk management. Now the concept, no boardroom wants to engage honestly discretionary effort. The work done beyond formal requirements. The engineer who stays an extra hour on a problem they did not have to solve. The manager who calls a client on Sunday. It cannot be mandated or purchased directly. It emerges only when people feel the system is fair and their investment will be reciprocated. A Gallup-style study found just 4% of Gen Z and millennial employees strongly agree their contributions are effectively recognized. 4%. So 96% feel unrecognized, and if you do not feel recognized, you give contracted effort, not discretionary effort. The firm that lays off aggressively to hit quarterly numbers is simultaneously destroying the discretionary effort of everyone who survived. The savings show now. The effort loss shows in 18 months. It shows as degraded quality, slower delivery, falling customer satisfaction, talent drain nobody can quite explain. Leadership orders another cost cut, more effort disappears. The cycle accelerates until the organization runs at hollow minimum viable operation and calls it a leaner model. The machine breaks the coin, so fewer coins come, so it cuts more to hold margin, breaking more coins. That is the documented decay pattern. And the people who leave to build alternatives are disproportionately the most capable because they have the most options. Underperformers stay because they cannot leave. Your best people exit because they can. Meanwhile, independents report being happier and healthier. 84% of full-time independents say they are happier alone. 2/3 feel more secure. The two things companies were supposed to provide, the exits now provide better. Here is the reversal I promised. You think the problem is that Gen Z will not give companies loyalty. The actual problem is that companies built a structure where loyalty was penalized, cutting tenured higher paid workers first, treating human capital as cost, using AI to replace the exact roles loyalty was meant to protect. The surprise that the rational response is the real absurdity. That is not a people problem. It is an incentive design problem. You build a machine that punishes coins, and the coins stop coming. You cannot fix that with a campaign about company culture. You fix it by changing what the machine produces when the button is pressed. So 3 practical moves follow. First, build a second income source before you need it. 10 to 15 hours a week, 500 to 1,000 a month. Its purpose is not replacing salary. It is changing your negotiating position. 2 income sources negotiate differently than 1. Second, analyze the incentive structure before you give loyalty. Who owns it? How is the CEO paid? Is it beholden to quarterly calls? What is its layoff history? Third, stop confusing income with wealth. The machine told you over 4 straight years it is a transaction, not a wealth-building partner. So take the transaction and take it well. Negotiate hard, build transferable skills, then convert income into assets that pay you whether or not you are employed. The plan is yours, not the machine's. What looks like a generation that refuses to commit is a generation that committed to a different structure entirely. If this is the kind of analysis that is actually useful to you, subscribe. The next one is just as cold about something people get just as emotionally wrong.